Today's story is Ticktock, Banneker's Clock, written by Shana Keller and illustrated by David Gardner, and published by Sleeping Bear Press. This story is nonfiction. In other words, it's true facts. It's a biography because it's written about an actual person's life. Join me now as we learn more about Benjamin Banneker. He was born in the state of Maryland in the year 1731. That's a long time ago. I hope you have fun looking at his life. Chesapeake Bay birds soared high as a new day washed gently across young Benjamin Banneker's farm. Early morning frosts glittered the ground all the way from Benjamin's front door down to the river's wet bank. Winter was almost here, and everything on his farm was in order. Benjamin had wrapped his hives to keep the bees warm and calm. He had repaired his fence to keep the deer out of his gardens. He had harvested his vegetables and picked his fruit one last time before the cold swooped in. Now, with his chores completed, Benjamin had time to dream. Benjamin followed a familiar trail leading toward his favorite spot under the chestnut tree. For entertainment, Benjamin had taught himself how to play the violin. He had also taught himself how to play the flute. On hot summer days, the tree shaded him while he played his instruments, blending his soft music with the birds' songs. But today, sunlight danced through the bare branches as Benjamin sat down. He hardly noticed the cold ground beneath him, nor did he enjoy the beauty of the chestnut tree. Today was different. Today was quiet. He did not bring his flute or his violin to play. In his hands was a different kind of instrument, a small pocket watch. Benjamin had borrowed the watch from a gentleman in Elk Ridge Landing. This was the first pocket watch he had ever seen. The gentleman knew Benjamin was clever, and he was happy to share his timepiece. He trusted Benjamin and was curious to see what Benjamin could learn from a pocket watch. Benjamin held the watch to his ear. It fascinated him. How did it work? Why was it ticking? And how did the little hands move so smoothly? He knew there were gears inside it. He could hear them ticking and clicking. He thought of the gears he had seen in the mills. They were far too big to fit inside a pocket watch, of course, but the idea was the same. Gears connected together to turn things. He just didn't know how they fit exactly. Benjamin wanted to find out. Knowing he had permission from its owner, Benjamin carefully took the case backing off the watch. Inside, he discovered a world of wonderful whirls. There were gears of all shapes and sizes. Such a tiny maze. Oh, it looks like even Benjamin's dog is curious about this pocket watch. And what do you think Benjamin is doing? Benjamin took his time to study the miniature machine. This was a challenge, and he loved challenges. The timepiece was fascinating, but it was small. Too small to sit on a mantel or hang from a wall. Benjamin knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to make a clock much bigger than the watch, one that chimed. It was called a striking clock. But how? It stood to reason if he wanted a bigger clock, he would need bigger clock parts. But first he would need a diagram, a picture to explain how the pieces fit together. Benjamin remembered his mathematics skills. With a proper scale, he knew he could make something big into something small, or something small into something big. Ideas swirled through his mind. As winter rolled in and only the blue jays and cardinals remained, Benjamin carefully took the watch apart, piece by piece. In his cabin, he drew many diagrams, an exact picture of each moving part. The diagrams were needed for two reasons. The first was to make sure he would remember how to put the watch back together again. The second was to draw a bigger picture, or scale from the original, so that he could make a bigger clock. Benjamin finally finished studying the tiny pieces. He gently put the pocket watch back together so he could return it. Then he spent the rest of the winter working on his sketches. There's Benjamin working on his sketches. Do you see what he's using to write with? It's a bird's feather that he dips into that jar next to him full of ink. Don't forget that Benjamin lived many, many years ago, when they didn't have pens and pencils, or computers even, like we do now. Oh, and what do you suppose Benjamin's dog wants to do? Look at the diagrams he has drawn. Oh, looks like he's outside doing some chores. When the days began to lengthen and the ground was warm again, Benjamin had completed his drawings. Spring, with her bright sunny days, was the perfect time to start building his machine. There was a slight problem, however. What could he build with? The watch was made of metal, but metal was very expensive in 1753. Benjamin did not have enough to spare for his project, nor could he afford to buy any. What could he do? What did he have? One day, while taking a break from his chores, Benjamin walked the path to his favorite spot. Leaning against the solid tree, Benjamin worried that he might not be able to finish his project. He played his wooden flute to calm his mind. Suddenly he stopped. He looked at the land around him. The answer was right in front of him, even in his hands. The very instrument he played was made of wood. Benjamin had plenty of wood on his farm, and it was free. What do you think Benjamin is going to do? Spring turned into summer. The sun was high. The garden was growing, and Benjamin was excited to get started. He used every spare moment he had to find the perfect pieces of wood. Some he found by the creek, others he picked from his pear trees in the orchard. Once he had enough wood, Benjamin began to carve the clock pieces he had drawn in his diagrams. He carved as fast as he could, but soon his excitement turned to frustration. The pieces snapped and broke. Benjamin couldn't continue to carve until he figured out why the pieces were breaking. Are you wondering why the pieces kept breaking? There's Benjamin carving the pieces of wood. Oh, and don't forget, Benjamin lives on a farm. He has to plant crops and grow them and take care of them. What do you think he's doing here in this picture? While he thought about his new problem, Benjamin tended his growing crops. As he was plucking bugs off his tobacco leaves, a thought came to him. When his family harvested the tobacco leaves, they had to cure them. Curing meant drying the leaves out until all the moisture was gone. Suddenly, Benjamin had an idea. If he could cure leaves, maybe he could cure wood. The fresh wood he used was too soft and too moist. That's why it was bending and breaking. He must dry it out to make the wood stronger. Benjamin knew he had to be patient. Curing wood would be easy, but waiting for it to dry would take months. He picked out new pieces of wood and placed them in his family's tobacco shed. The tobacco shed was a cool, dry place, away from sunlight and away from bugs, perfect for curing. While the wood cured, Benjamin went back to work on his farm. Finally, winter was here. Tucked under a thick blanket of snow, the farm was quiet. Harvest season had come and gone, and the pieces of wood were dried out and ready to be carved. Benjamin set out his drawings and sharpened his pocket knife. Then he began to carve. Benjamin carved straight through the winter. He carved by the window until the sun set. When it was too dark to see, he lit his candles and carved by their light. Using his sketches, he carefully carved the large pieces and the small pieces. He carved and carved until finally the pieces of wood had become parts for a clock. Oh, and there wasn't electricity in people's homes back when Benjamin was living. He had to burn candles in order to see at night. By the time spring returned, Benjamin had finished carving all of the gears and wheels and small pins he needed to hold the wheels and gears together. He had even carved large pieces into what would become the clock's stand and case. Benjamin had every piece he needed, every piece except one. There was one piece he could not make from wood, the bell. Oh, that's right, he wants his clock to chime. I wonder what he's going to do. Well, Benjamin looks pretty happy here. That sign above his head says Metal Smith. Do you see what Benjamin is holding in his hand? Benjamin bought his bell from a small shop in Elk Ridge Landing. His neighbors were excited to hear about his clock project. They couldn't wait to see it once he was finished. With all of the clock's pieces now ready, bit by bit Benjamin began to fit everything together. He used his drawings to guide him. His toughest challenge was to get the hands on his clock to match up perfectly with the second, minute, and hour of each day. It took more than one try, but Benjamin had learned to be patient. He wouldn't give up now. That summer, when the light was bright and warm, Benjamin set his striking clock on the mantel. Timed with the sun, he set the hands and stepped back. It worked. Remember that Benjamin's neighbors were excited about his project? I wonder if that's one of his neighbors. When he first borrowed the pocket watch, Benjamin did not know it would take nearly 2 years to complete his project. But he remained focused. Over the seasons, he drew his diagrams, found and cured the wood, carved the pieces, and finally assembled his clock. The little iron bell chimed every hour on the dot for the next 40 years. His neighbors, near and far, came to see his amazing invention. I so hope you enjoyed this biography, this nonfiction writing about an actual person's life. The author has written more about Benjamin Banneker. I hope you ask a parent to read it with you and learn more about this fascinating person. And I hope you check out other books that Shana Keller has written. She is an amazing author.